we're both brought to Niagara Falls on the US side to see how to connect everything. And we looked at businesses and how they could do it. I just want to bring that intensity to what we're doing now.
Great. Questions?
I would just like to say that we're extremely lucky to have you and interested in doing this and in Webster Grows at all. So thank you I know you are a busy person and it's a great honor to have you like in this.
You guys
role.
know how important Bob was to Webster and what he did. Bob's important to me. So that's why I'm here. I want to continue what he's done. I want to help take care of those apples, get them the right color for stock.
Yeah.
And, anything I can do. You guys are growing it. We're becoming the arts community. Let's just bring it on through.
All right. Great. Other questions? I feel like I should ask you a really hard question or something since you were nervous and you feel like you'd be in trouble.
My wife was like, they're going to ask what your favorite artist is. And I was like, I don't think so. And then I said something and she's like, they're going to ask for a live. And I'm like, a live? That's 20 minutes. So I'll tell you, it's Brancusi if they're dead. And if they're alive,
Okay.
I like Irwin Worm or Doho Sue.
There you go.
Okay, here we go. All right. Well, thank you. We will make appointments and you will hear from our illustrious city clerk, Katie Nakazano, and go from there.
All right. Thank you guys for your.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, guys.
All right. Is there anything on the regular agenda anyone would like to review? Sorry, these two are, sure you were. All right, then we will move on to updates. And you know what? We'll start with Sarah this time. Emily, we're just gonna let you off the hook here.
It's not gonna be very exciting because I don't have any. Sorry.
I have no.
Emerson, oh, well, then I guess you don't need to turn your microphone on.
Oh, no updates, man.
Yes. Let's see, both the Business Development Commissions and the Sustainability Commission have met since we were here last. The Sustainability Commission has selected March 3rd for their solar event. It's going to be a public event for the community to come attend on. It's a Sunday afternoon from 1 to 3. It'll be at Olive and Oak in the atrium there. They're meeting this week to figure out the details, so I'll have more of an update in a couple weeks. Business Development Commission, as you know, tomorrow is the networking coffee at the Parks Complex in one of the rooms from 8:30 to 10. And there will be a short presentation on community improvement districts, which is a method of organizing all of our business districts together for financial benefits. They'll also present a new online map that we have bought into called Blue Dot. It's a platform for maps, and it will show retail and service businesses, and it's a cool platform that they can manage their own profiles, and it'll be public facing. So anyone who's interested in searching for a certain service or knowing what sales are around, they can access it there. And that's all I have.
Excellent, thank you. David?
Green Space invited me that last night and they're going to come to our next city council meeting. They got a really great award for the Greener City program.
Thank you. Green Space is going to come to our next meeting. They got a Gold Leaf Award, a recent meeting, which is an international award recognizing the Greener City initiative. So they're going to come visit with us in 2 weeks, and it's a really big deal and really proud of the work that they've done.
Excellent.
Nice.
Yeah. Coming up, Arbor Day is on April 17th. It's going to be in Southwest Park this year. They're going to do tree plantings at 3 and then a brief ceremony at 5. And then there's going to be an eco-ed talk at 5:30 at the same place. So Arbor Day, eco-ed together. We're going to do a tree walk with someone talking about kind of the interaction between trees and people and kind of noticing the trees that are around us. So that should be a really good tree walk. And then they have more eco-ed talks planned, and sustainability is doing some as well. The ones I have on here, there's one on bees and pollinators in June and one on watersheds in September, and that one's going to be at Larson Park. So good stuff going there. Historic preservation meets next week, but there's an item from them on our main agenda for today. And I'm pausing just in case something.
Well,
for
that's right.
tonight.
We'll come back because there's always
I think
something
that-
that, there's
I think
always
that's it.
something somebody
that's all I'm
remembers. All right. Yeah, Katie, anything from you?
No, thank you.
Distinguished, back from vacation, slightly tanned, city attorney.
I have nothing to report.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have anything.
Wow, we're just strolling along. Well, I'm going to stop that progress here. It's like we received, or I received notification that we, the city of Webster Groves, is entitled to appoint a representative to the St. Louis County Council for the University of Missouri Extension. So this is the governing body for the Missouri Extension organization here in St. Louis. Our city clerk informs me that we have been able to identify someone that made this appointment. So I will share with you this letter. And if you have anyone in mind who might be interested, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the extension programs, but they do some really good ones, and they've done some in the past in our community, including some things with Webster Rock Hill Ministries in terms of food preservation but also a whole wide range of educational outreach. So I would like to stay married. So I'll send that in if you have anything. And I think Jenny's going to share on social media so that people, if they're interested, they can get in touch with me.
Have we had appointees in the past, or is this new for us?
We have in the past. It's new for me. I think you have 2-year terms and you can serve two-year terms. So I wonder if we haven't had one for, yeah. Or if we have, somebody stayed for a while and
Yeah.
we just haven't had to
I'm
reappoint.
curious what kind of backgrounds have been appointed in the past, but it's an interesting opportunity.
Yeah. So if someone's interested, and I think, their criteria, what they're interested is somebody who is active in our community and knowledgeable about the needs of our community. So you don't have to have a professional criteria to be part of this. They want to know what kind of programming might be useful for Webster Groves and the residents of Webster Groves. The Arts Commission met this morning, and former Mayor Welch came and talked about art procurement and placement and how that's happened in the past. We have a kind of new generation of membership on the Arts Commission, and so it was good to have that conversation and learn a little bit more about that. And then also had a pretty exciting conversation, and Scott knows all about this, is, the new park that we've been talking about for Great Rivers Greenway. Some preliminary conversations are happening with the Castley family about some sort of destination piece of artwork to be part of that park. Whether it's something that Bob has created or his son Jim may do the work as well. So we'll see where it goes, but it's an exciting potential collaboration there. Library board met this a couple weeks ago as well. I'm happy to say they are engaged with a partnership for the summer with Webster Rock Hill Ministries. They're going to do some outreach and book and some story times in Ivory Crockett Park through the course of the summer, and have some entertainers come as well. So that's exciting. I didn't know this. I learned you can book a librarian who has a specialization in whatever topic you're interested in for 30 minutes. So those of you who have school-age children might especially want to let them know they can book a librarian to get some help there. And they, like us, are watching the Missouri legislature. I don't know if any of you saw in the Post-Dispatch, there has been a bill introduced to make all library boards in the state of Missouri elected by popular vote, which would mean a whole new way of doing libraries. So we'll see what happens with that. The last thing I will mention is, as we see the election coming up, in the past, we have had some sort of strategic planning prioritization session of council shortly after the election to talk about what we want to do in the next 2 years. We just did the strategic plan, so I don't think we need to focus on the actual substance of what those priorities are. I would like us to have at least a couple hours retreat together to talk about how we want to function as a council and what we can expect of one another, how we might manage incorporating some of the really big things that are coming forward, like Proposition W, like the comprehensive plan, like the stormwater improvement plan. And so if you all are amenable to setting aside a couple hours in April, that we can have that conversation. Katie and I will work on scheduling and work on an agenda. And if there are particular things you want on that agenda, please let me know. Because we'll get that put together so we can make sure we get all the appropriate sign-offs on that. All right, anyone remember anything now? All right, we will then move on to our first topic, and we will have, who's gonna kick this off?
Go for it.
All right, so Stratcom RX, right? Is that the whole name?
That's the whole.
All right.
of it.
Heather Todd Lasher's, no, Heather Lasher Todd, there we
The
go.
one.
Is here with us. Sorry, it came out of my mouth and it didn't sound right. Is
Yep.
here to talk to us about our plans. So please.
Absolutely. Well, you know your plan, but we're going to talk about how we're going to make sure that everybody in Webster
Else
Groves
knows.
knows about your plan. And so, yes, I'm Heather Lasher Todd. I'm a Webster Groves resident. I also am the vice president of Stratcom RX, along with my colleague, boss, and all around amazing human, Kelly Ferrara Bain, who is here tonight as well. We were very excited to bid on this project and to get the opportunity to work on this. Public engagement is really the heart and soul of the work we do and what we're most interested in, almost exclusively for nonprofits and public entities. So this was right up our alley, and it is right across the street from me. So I'm very glad to be here with you tonight to talk about Destination WG and the Prop W education campaign to make sure that voters understand what's on the ballot in April. So I'm going to walk you through. Oh, I'm not sure this one's working. Let's try this. Here we go. I recognize that the slides are behind you, so this might be a little.
We have them on the screen, so
That's
we're
good. I
good.
was gonna say. Okay, great. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of kind of where we've been and then look forward into what we're planning over the next 2 months. So the goal, of course, of this education campaign is to let Webster residents know about Prop W, which they'll be voting on this April. And of course, encouraging them to come out to the polls and vote on that. And really, in particular, this idea, I think a lot of folks know that there's going to be a vote on the pool. We want to extend that and make sure that they're aware of all of the things that are part of Prop W, and that there's really amenities and things, for the whole community and all parts of the community. In addition to that, it's an opportunity to create a brand around that Destination WG, which is already in use, but to really push that forward with the community. That's something that can be used whether this passes or not, looking forward for other things where we're talking about Parks Department, other things where we're talking about arts, where we're talking about things that are part of that destination image for the city. So we really want to establish some familiarity with that. With the brand of that, we wanted to create a brand, visually, and then also really going to push those words forward for the public. And then, of course, always to increase and add to the great communication and engagement that's already happening here with residents, and to really kind of push into additional engagement in the future. And of course, as you well know, but an important note, that the city cannot advocate on behalf of or against something that's on the ballot. So this very much is an education campaign. We want to let folks know what it is, but we're not promoting a yes or no vote, just putting out the information so that folks can make their own decision. And of course, the timeline, we started back on January 8th, and I've got it through April 3rd, the day after the election. We'll do a wrap up, recap, and share some resources back following that. So in January, the first thing we did was develop that logo and graphics, and you can see those here. The one on the far left with the Prop W, of course, is what we'll be using during this campaign and during this education campaign, so to really help folks identify with what's going to be on the ballot in April. But then there's two other treatments over there as well. One with the established in 1896 and one without it, but that can be used going forward. So if Prop W passes, it can be part of that public education work that's done after the election. It can be part of promoting other amenities that are part of that, other amenities and things that are happening in years to come. So then we also worked on creating some informational messages and going to go through a couple of those in just a minute. I'm going to go back here and just say that in addition to that, we designed one-page info sheet, an FAQ document, which you can see in large form over here, but hopefully you've also seen in print form. And those are things that you can take with you if you're going to meetings. We can make as many copies as needed, and you can take those out to any community event you're going to. We want to, you know, folks will put them in a store. If they'll put, you know, we're hopefully to have those at the rec center, and we've got some of these and other things there already. So some opportunities for folks to really get a sense of that. Those have the QR code that goes directly to that webpage that talks about all of this. So that was another piece there, was updating that website with new information about what's on the ballot. And then designing a yard sign and some other informational materials. All of that also features the QR code. And I know that yard signs are in and they're here. There's some up here tonight and there's others. I think there's some available at the rec center and some going up in parks. So when people are using the amenities that our city has, they can scan that QR code and right then learn about what might be happening. So maybe there's a tennis court update or a new walking trail that's happening in that park. That's going to be something that the users of those facilities will want to know about. And then we wrote some additional talking points specific to sustainability and green space, which was some feedback that we got from those commissions that they wanted to be able to point out some of the features in Prop W that are specific to that. So we went through the logo, really looking at this as the campaign with the words that I think a lot of us associate with Webster: play, connect, and thrive. So it really plays into that idea of what's happening with some of the amenities that are here, but also that idea of connection and moving forward. So if this does pass, as you know, we've got the new amenities, but also repairs and improvements. So we've got that up front. I think that's another thing that folks are not really aware of. And then, of course, the important piece that folks should know that they're not voting on a tax rate increase in this measure. Our messaging goes on to list all of the various things that are under consideration with Prop W. So not just a water park that would replace the aquatic center, but going on with the splash park, improving equity in facilities at Ivory Crockett Park, which does not have facilities that are up to the level at other parks right now, making improvements to the ice arena, tennis courts, and on, and you know all of those, but really making sure that folks see the list. It's beyond just one issue. And then, of course, we need to address the indoor pool. That's a question that a lot of folks have. So we have a message here about the fact that it does not include an indoor pool option, but it lays a foundation for one to be built. So that is something that is, you know, it's not off the table, but it is not part of this funding. And we wanted to be sure that that was clearly laid out for voters. And then also letting folks know that this is not a final list and there will be a public education campaign. If this passes, there will be engagement with the public. I'm sorry, not a public education campaign, but there will be engagement with the public to make final decisions on the plans. So we've made that info sheet, the FAQ document, updated the website, created the yard signs and all of that with QR codes that come back to the site. And then posters that are here in City Hall and over at the rec center. And like I said, you've seen these. Oops. FAQs, and then the updated website, which has some of the frequently asked questions laid out, but also a list of the full document. And that's where you go when you scan that QR code. And the yard signs, just an example here of kind of how to target this messaging if folks are interested in a specific aspect of it. So for the sustainability and green space folks, looking at that eco-friendly lighting, the solar panels, energy efficient filtration systems, and a reduction in the amount of water that's used, that sort of thing, making sure that they're aware of some of those things that are of interest to them. So looking forward in this month, we've started our social media. Hopefully you've seen some things coming out. That's a great place to plug in and share some of that, encourage organizations to share that. Those are all informational messages about what is and is not in Proposition W and how to learn more. So those will be running in February, March, and then of course the first 2 days of April. And we've also created some social media advertising. So in addition to the organic posts that are being put out, some things that will get in front of people, even if they're not, you know, following the city's page or looking for that information. So hopefully reaching those eyeballs and people will see it enough times that they'll say, oh, okay, especially as we get close to the election, what is this that I'm voting on? So going forward this month, we're going to be doing some A/B testing. So it's comparing the two ads against each other, which one's performing better, which one are people clicking on, and decide which way to go forward with those funds for the advertising. We'll also be creating newsletter copy and other informational pieces. So if you're, working with groups, with community organizations, commissions who have email newsletters that go out, if you send email newsletters out or know of other, folks who are doing that, we'd love to give them a piece of informational copy to include in their newsletter and other pieces of informational things that can be sent out by folks who are already emailing and communicating with members of the public. We'll also be working on designing some informational mail pieces. Now, those will be mailed in March, but of course need to be designed now so that they'll be ready for that. Those will go out to all of the households in Webster Grove. So there'll be 2 of those that will come out in March. And then each week we'll also add 1 additional social media post. So a total of 3 each week. And that would be, if we're getting a lot of questions on something, if you're hearing something and let us know, we can address that. We can provide more information, answer a question. We want to have that opportunity to be responsive as we're going forward. And then also we're considering how to use video. So how can we do some videos to post on social media or on the website that might answer questions or share a fact, just to capture a little more attention in a different way. This is the February social media schedule. No need to memorize this, but just know that it's here. So if you want to think, oh, I want to make sure I'm sharing these things when they come out, we can share this with you, but also just looking at the city's Facebook page, you'll see that it's probably going to be in one of the most recent posts, and sharing those, just 2 clicks. I did it today on a post. It just takes a couple of seconds, and we really appreciate that, helping us to reach more folks. Just an example of some of the posts here that are going up. And then looking forward to March and that very first part of April, continuing to post 3 times a week on social media, finalizing and mailing those mail pieces, continuing to update the website and materials as needed with any questions or information that we're hearing that folks want to know about. Continuing those informational social media ads, adjusting that as needed. And then hopefully some print advertising, Webster Kirkwood Times, and sharing information, of course, ongoing with community members groups, that sort of thing. So where would we love for you all to plug in addition to all the work you're already doing to share information on this? I mentioned it about 6 times, I think. Share social media content. That's the easiest thing to do, and it's really very effective, and we appreciate you doing that and encouraging others to do that so that more people in town can see that content. Distributing yard signs with the QR code, especially if you know of some places that folks visit a lot, whether that's your front yard or another place in town that might be willing to put up an informational sign. The more of those we can get out with that QR code when people are standing around and think, oh yeah, I want to learn about this, right in the space where they are, instead of, them having to come to us or us having to track them down. So appreciate that. As you speak with community groups and community members, letting them know about this, providing those handouts, directing them to the website, and encouraging those groups also to share that information out, whether it be in their newsletters or by putting some flyers on a table. And then also, I know Dr. Peoples is going to speak about this, but a calendar tool. And I'll just note one more time, the last thing on there, of course, we want to remind people to vote, and we'll be doing that at the very end of this campaign, just a reminder of a get out the vote piece. I've got my email address and phone number here, but I'll let her go ahead and speak to that.
Thank you, appreciate it. And thank you for all of that information. There's been a tremendous amount of work done since that January 8th start date. The print materials are fantastic. Before you leave here tonight, I will set some at your stations of those print materials for you to take. And if you'll let us know how many yard signs you would like as well. But in terms of additional council involvement, rather than doing the traditional town hall, which we will have some when the vote passes at some point in time, hopefully, because at those town halls, we'll have an opportunity really to set up some stations, much like we did for the charter review amendments, and have some real specific things. So prior to that, how many of you have used a Calendly tool, perhaps in other areas of your business? So the Calendly is kind of fun. You get to put your availability, and I would recommend council members go in groups of 2 perhaps, but you get to put your availability, and then small groups of individuals or big groups of individuals can request you to come speak at their events. And staff will have some times included in there as well. So if people are more interested in finance, for example, they'll be able to say, you know, we'd love to see Councilwoman Bliss and Eric. Will they come meet with us? So we're going to roll out a lot of that. So I will be asking you for your availability pretty soon, and that will focus on towards the end of March.
This probably is a good time to mention, you know, we committed as a council to, you know, do some door-to-door distributing informational materials for both this and charter review. And one of the things that I know a couple of us have been talking about doing is, you know, when we gather together, maybe book in that with a little time that somebody can come to us if they have questions. So I'm suggesting that we look at the 2 Saturdays before the vote, which are March 23rd and March 30th. And, you know, do a morning of handing out literature, and then maybe go to Larson Park for an hour and say, anybody wants to come visit with us about this at Larson Park, we'll be there, some group of us, and do something similar on March 30th. I understand that I just picked those dates based on my availability, and that might not be your availability. So we can also have people do it whenever fits their schedule. But if you will let me know if the 23rd and the 30th, if you think that works for you, we could also, you know, pick out a weekday evening if that is better for some people as well. But we clearly want to try and find some time when people are at home and then make ourselves available.
Madam Mayor, if I can, you know,
Please.
I mentioned small groups being able to request, but if there's events like that, if you're going to be out in the community specific places, we can plug that into Calendly as well. If you want to meet at a coffee shop, any of those types of events, that can be in there as well so that people are aware, and we can push that in a variety of ways.
How about polling locations on the day of the election? Schedule that as well. Yard signs out there.
We'll certainly have the informational yard signs available at the polls, absolutely.
David, would you like to make an election day schedule for the council?
Yeah, absolutely.
For those of us who are available?
I was also gonna say, I mean, should we proactively reach out to groups that we know will assist in this? For instance, I would think like the swim clubs, the
So-
skating people, the school district, Webster University. That way we could at least, even if they don't want to have a meeting with us or want us to come, they have information, we can provide them the information they need for any meeting that they do have or any avenue that they have to get this information out.
As a matter of fact, we have, I have a meeting scheduled with leadership of the skating club, the swim team, the hockey club, the high school hockey club, the women's gardens associations, and a couple others, just to introduce some of these informational things and to see if they'd like to be involved.
That's fantastic. Great.
Yeah.
How
So,
about, should we contact the PTOs of all the schools?
I hadn't thought about that, but that's a good idea.
Of how to connect with people that are actually be potential voters as well. I'm happy to do, yeah, I think I remember having a list of them all. From this last election.
Well, the leadership will have changed since then, so that's fine. We can just, let's talk about it. We can get in touch with the school district and get that list as well.
So I'm just curious, how are we involved in the charter review items on the ballot as far as talking about them? Is that going to be?
So thank you, Councilwoman Bliss. There was a separate education campaign timeline and informational that was provided. So Stratcom RX is working on Prop W. We are doing the campaign education information for the charter review amendments in-house. And so it just so happens Ms. Starkey is here tonight.
So I was just curious about council's involvement in that.
So
I know
Yep.
that about the division of labor. I'm just curious about, will you need us for that?
apologies, I misunderstood the question. Absolutely. And a lot of this is dependent on how much time you all want to and how much you want to be involved. Your involvement is welcome. So we could also do the Calendly tool for that, if you would like to speak on that. My sense regarding the charter review amendments, because they are technical, there's not a lot of interest in that, but that doesn't mean that.
I'm just
We can't.
thinking it might come up. Just so I
Absolutely.
know How we would address it.
Yeah, so for example, we, I was invited to Rotary, or we collectively, I'm not quite sure who they had in mind when they started, but Dr. Peoples and I and Jeannie Kirkton are going to go to Rotary and talk about all the ballot initiatives.
Okay.
So I think we will be prepared because we will also have some information for Jenny to do both. And when we go out in March, yes, we
Okay.
need the information material for Prop W, but we also need the charter stuff. Because this, is something to get excited about, and that
Yeah.
is something that people
Yeah.
maybe are like, well, I don't know, what do you mean by this? And why do we have to do this?
It's the same thing with the charter review.
Is it the same thing with the amendments where it's educational and not like, all of this is, we're just educating?
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, Neil, would you like to comment on what that means, please?
Yeah, what it means is that you can educate away and tell everybody all the good reasons why these things are being proposed and why this is on the ballot. The only thing you can't say is vote yes or vote no. So again, it comes down to a situation where you can't use public monies for those purposes. That's both what we call the Big Hatch Act and the Little Hatch Act that limit what we do in this regard. But that doesn't mean that you can't speak to all of what you think are the positives of this activity. That becomes education. And if someone says to you, how are you going to vote? You can say, as a person, I'm going to vote for, or I'm
Can't
going to
speak
vote
for the
against.
council.
You just can't say, the council says, please vote yes or please vote no.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions, comments?
So I know we didn't create a separate website. It's going to be connected through the webstergroves.org.
Yes, it is a subpage on there, and that's both because it was already existing previously during the public education and engagement work that was done prior to putting this on the ballot, but also, of course, we always want to drive people back to that website that's going to stay around, and we want them to be familiar with coming there for information about their city, so.
Gotcha. Will we highlight that on the front page of the webstergroves.mo.gov?
I think
Yes.
it's there.
It's on there.
Look at that.
We've got like a main, I don't know, we've got a main page for the election, and it tells people, go here to look at the charter review, go here to look at Destination WG, go here to look at the candidates for council. So we've got all 3 pages set up. You can, and on the front page of the website at the very bottom, we say like April 2024, that takes you to the whole election. For the charter review page, we do right now have some of the information on there that just talks about what the rationale is behind the 10 elements. Like, this is what it is. Here's why it's on the ballot. This is kind of what they were thinking. So it puts in a little bit more plain English so that people can kind of understand why we decided to put that on there, or why the charter review advisory board decided to put it on there. And that will be a handout. We'll have a handout for that. It is a lot of information because there are 10 things. So it's a matter of trying to find a way to squeeze that into one page front and back, but we'll be able to do that. And I know that one of the mailings that goes out closer to the election will kind of be more of a vote. Don't forget to vote. These are the things on the ballot, and it'll kind of sum everything up together. But yeah, right now you can find charter review, Destination WG, and council candidates.
Excellent. Thank you.
I just had two
Please go ahead.
questions. Is that okay? So, one on the eco-friendly LED lights that came up at the green space meeting last
Yeah,
night.
yeah.
And what we mean by eco-friendly. So I don't know if we want to add any language or clarify or leave it alone. But, there's like the energy usage piece of it, but then there's also like a light pollution piece. So would these lights be, less light pollution and that sort of thing? So I wanted to mention that as something that may come up again. It's come up
Yeah.
once. And then the other one was just like we're phrasing it as likely projects, but I know that that's not all in stone. And the amphitheater is a big one that we've talked about. And I wasn't sure that was all the way in the likely category. Like, it was a possibility category, but I didn't know if it had crossed into likely. So that was one that kind of struck me, based on our earlier council decisions, that we didn't seem like totally sold on that. I know we don't have to be until after the ballot, but that was one where I was like, I don't know if I would put that under likely. And I know the materials are made. I'm not asking for like
Oh.
edits or anything, but I just wanted to mention that was one that struck me a little bit.
So Councilwoman Bliss, and perhaps Mayor wants to speak to this. When you all did the prioritization of the projects, that was included in the prioritization, which is why it was on there. Those items that were, because you all removed some of the items that came forward, if you remember removing those. So those weren't included. But you're right, nothing is set in stone. And a lot of this is going to depend on timing as well. in addition to what projects are finally decided, cost, all of that. But we also really want to remind voters is this is not going to be a one-year project. Destination WG is going to take course over several years, most likely.
I just am cautious about promising things that are not set in stone. That's all.
And I think that's a fair caution for all of us as we talk about this. You know, I think there is some discussion around the amphitheater to continue because, you know, there's some concerns about, you know, what we don't know as much about what the operating costs over time are going to be. So part of me agrees with you, but it is true that this body said that this was one of those priority projects that we would include, but we do recognize there's more discussion. So, and I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that because that's part of reinforcing that once this passes, the details and what we're actually doing on different projects, we still want input from the public. Because really the only project we've gotten significant input from the public on is the actual, what are we calling it now? We're not calling it the aquatic center?
Water park.
Water park, thank you.
And the performance park.
Well, we haven't gotten specific input on any of those projects except the water park is what I'm saying.
We haven't. I was just directing back to the language we're using.
Okay. Park is, okay, so in doubt, say park. When in doubt, say park. So I think that's part of reinforcing that this is an evolving, it's not as you said, I think you used the phrase set in stone. Maybe you didn't.
It's just a word likely, you know.
Yeah.
That comment.
And to your first point as well, as you are meeting with folks, as you're attending these meetings and you're hearing feedback, that's exactly what we would like to hear. We've got those, you know, we've got a lot of flexibility built in here. We haven't, you know, prescribed the social media posts and the mail pieces and all of that for the rest of this time. We want to be flexible and responsive to what you're hearing in the community. So if we need to have, you know, additional FAQs, if we need to, I don't know the answer to that question and I am never going to be the right person, but there is probably someone who can speak to that. And we can figure out how we can make sure that folks are getting, you know, that we're following back up and making sure they're getting that information. And then they know how to share it with others who will want to hear about that as well. So please keep us up in the loop.
And maybe this is a time to suggest what's the best way to do that? To go to Heather directly, to go through Jenny or through you? What's our process going to be?
I would appreciate if you would contact me. Jenny has been a great support, but she is leading the charter review one. So we've tried to separate the duties on
Okay.
that. So if you, just so this council knows, we have a full team meeting every Wednesday. And so we've been meeting. So if there's things that you hear, concerns that you have, if you get them to me, we will include it in our Wednesday meeting.
All right. Anyone thought of anything else at this point? Thank you very much.
Absolutely. We're really
Thank you.
excited to be working
Yeah.
on this with you. So.
Well, we're looking forward to the next couple of months.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Heather.
All right. And you're going to very politely sit there, but you know, you can go ahead and none of us will be offended because you all have lives. So I feel obligated to say such a thing. Okay, that's fine. And we will not, this is broadcast and recorded, but we won't report that. All right, so our next item, and I think we probably have time to do this during work session, is the local sales tax on groceries and whether or not we would like to do any sort of resolution. A couple weeks from now is the visit to Jeff City for the Missouri Municipal League. And I think if we're going to do anything, we probably ought to go ahead and take some action so that can be given to them at that time. And if we don't want to do anything, then that's fine too. And you received in the packet a draft resolution that came from Manchester, I think, or their past resolution. I toyed around with some language because I wanted to add a few things. I don't know whether that's acceptable to anyone if they want. And then also you received the state data on what this would cost different municipalities. I will tell you, yesterday I received revised state data. No explanation about where why the revisions were made or what the changes were in the calculation, but our impact went from $1.8 million to $880,000. Out of the 1 point something like 7 billion that they had anticipated, I think we're down to about 950 million. I don't know if you remember that number or not. It's a huge number still, by the way. And I don't want the reassessment to, color the fact that this is a lot of money, but it is not nearly as much money as they originally thought it was.
And we know it won't go back.
Well, because they didn't tell us why they revised the estimate. I don't
So we
know.
Okay.
So the estimate by the State Department of Revenue originally was that for the city of Webster Groves, it would be about $1.8 million in lost revenue. They have revised that down to $880,000. Yes. But that's so now we're talking about if this passes the legislature without any revenue replacement from the state, we're talking about $880,000 that we'd have to find in new revenue sources.
And is there any talk from the state, because I thought I heard on the news about some conversation about what they would consider or any conversation they've had about how they would replace that revenue?
The only bill that I am aware of, and if anybody else knows additional things, is that Crystal Quaid, who is the Democratic leader of the House, has proposed a tax on yachts, which are currently not taxable, and maybe one other luxury item that we then could apply for funds from. It's not an automatic replacement. We would then apply for funds and we would compete with school districts and other entities to get our revenue replacement.
Madam Mayor, Eric has raised his hand. I think he has.
Oh,
some
good.
information
He
to
knows
add.
way more than I do. Oh, Eric, I wish I had seen your hand before I had anything to say. Please go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members. I hope you can hear me okay. Just briefly, the revision in numbers does line up to where the original numbers that I gave you a few weeks back when we discussed this matter came out. The MML had given us a certain way to pull them, and then DOR gave a different set of numbers to the Muni League and such, the Pat Kelly's group. But those numbers do line up now. I just want to caution that it's not just 800,000, because that doesn't include the public safety sales tax, which flows through the county and back to us. So that is not included in that. So it's probably about $1 million, a shade over $1 million. I think our estimate that we had in that budget in our presentation to you is pretty accurate with that included. And then also, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, the 880 only includes the natural piece of the pooled sales tax. So as you know, the 1 cent sales tax that we collect that goes to the pool, we get more than what we collect back. That does not include that multiplier effect back that we're drawing from other communities. So it's probably going to go up by another $50,000 to $60,000 for that effect.
All right. What say you all?
Well, so is there, okay, there's talk about a yacht tax. Is there talk, about those decisions being made prior to,
The Missouri legislature.
Exactly. So is this just like pie in the sky conversation, or what are those conversations in conjunction with the timeline that we have that?
So there are multiple bills, some of which are moving forward to get rid of this sales tax. In the last legislative session, they were stopped by a coalition actually of Republicans and Democrats. Since they're back, the Municipal League has suggested that those of us who care to act in this month so that they can demonstrate how municipalities are impacted and that municipalities have taken action by passing these resolutions to ask them not to do what they're going to do. That way they believe they have a stronger hand in lobbying to try and shape these or stop them, depending on what other alternatives might be available. So is this pie in the sky? This is trying to give some ammunition to the Municipal League as they lobby to stop or change these particular proposals.
So the municipal leagues, oh my goodness. Position is that there is some interest in their stopping the legislation for removing the sales tax?
That not only is there, that is a priority of the Municipal League. We are a member of the Municipal League, we don't have to agree with everything they do, but as an organization, the municipal league has stated one of their priorities is stopping this sales tax removal, grocery sales tax removal, because of the amount of money it would cost municipalities. We actually, and Eric could speak to this, are better off than a fair number of municipalities, some of whom have half to 65% of their revenue comes from sales tax. And a bunch of that comes from grocery stores.
So the municipal league's position in stopping this in lieu of finding a replacement. They just
So,
don't want it, period.
did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Well, no, I'll wait.
Okay, I think that the municipal league's position is yes, that we have to stop this because the legislatures are the ones who get to offer the bill, who get to offer the alternatives. And so I think at this point, it's don't enact this because the bills have already been introduced.
We need a decision if we want to join with the resolution or not.
Whether we
Right.
would like to or not, whether we would like to pass a resolution asking the state legislature to not pass this particular.
In the red line and there's some conditions that.
So the red line I put in because I do want to acknowledge that there is a good reason for some of the people in the state of Missouri to be exempt from this, right? It's a very costly kind of thing. And so the language that I put in there that either the state would find a way to replace the revenue or that there would be some sort of means testing to it so that people who really need that sort of relief would get that relief and it would be a much smaller impact on our budget that way. That's what that was the intention of what's in the red ink
And
and
it seems clear, and you did it 3 times, so it's not, it's pretty clear to anyone. I mean, I'm just saying beyond our council that this
Yeah.
is, we are saying we want to stop it, but we are, mindful of why they wanted to get rid of it in the first place.
well, why some of them did. Some of them
Correct.
just want to get rid of every tax possible. I think it's not fair to let them off the hook entirely that way. But again, this is just my messing around with this. We as a council, I mean, I don't know whether you all want to do this or not.
I'm for it.
I'm for it.
I think this is a great idea. I think that this proposal by the state legislature is unbelievably short-sighted, but the only change I would request in your red line version, Lauren, I thank you for taking the laboring oar on this, would be either removing the consider a means test proposal or change the word or to and. Because even if there is a means
Yeah.
test proposal, I still want a full replacement.
Okay.
Mayor, is there a timeline you want to get this out or?
Yeah, so I think, no, I don't have a calendar in front of me. Our meeting day is the same day as the municipal league, right? For this month? Yeah, so we could pass this on the 20th. But when I'm in Jeff City visiting offices, I can say this will pass tonight if I'm sure of that. And it sounds like there are enough votes that I could be sure of that.
Yeah.
And I could have the actual text with me then, if you all are comfortable with that.
So you need, if we have any recommended change.
Why don't we say by, Monday of next week?
Well,
Yes, because then they can be, incorporated by the time the packet goes out on Thursday.
send them to you.
Yes, I think there are like 5 things you have for me now that you have to get back by the 12th, so. Right,
Early Valentine's Day gift.
all right. Does anyone else have any comments on this particular?
Thanks for doing this.
Thank
This
you.
is really
Wow.
important.
Well, I wish that we could find a way to give the relief to people who need the relief and not blow up budgets in the process, so. Okay, so I think we need to talk about appointments to boards and commissions. As you are aware, Richard Irwin has applied for the Arts Commission. Oh, I was gonna ask who the liaison is and whether they, and that would be me. And so does anyone object? I think he would be a great addition.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, he is way
Will bring the
overqualified.
qualifications to us, which will be good.
Well, and it increases our, we have a member who is connected to the St. Louis Art Museum now. I mean, we have some some growing institutional connections that I think are great. Charles Janicki, as you recall, interviewed for the, he's currently serves on the Board of Adjustment as an alternate member. He interviewed for the Architectural Review Board, which does have a vacancy. We were holding off because we thought we might have another application, and we have not. Do we want to appoint Mr. Janicki?
Yeah.
I do have a.
I'm gonna go ahead, Pam, before we
So-
do that, yeah.
In thinking about the process of a homeowner wanting to make changes, there's a possibility they need to go through historic preservation, and then they would go to ARB, and then possibly, depending on the ARB decision, they could go to the Board of Adjustment. And so I think we need to be cautious about appointing the same person who could be hearing a project in front of two of those boards. And so would it be prudent to think about whether they need to recuse themselves from the second time they hear a project? I see Mara sitting up straight.
And I see Neil leaning forward, so.
The answer is he would stand down from the Board of Adjustment and serve the ARB. So he's an
Oh,
alternate
okay.
on the Board of Adjustment.
But do we need any sort of policy that says we don't want multiple reviews by a single? It seems to give one individual a lot of sway.
That would be a conflict situation. And
Right.
again, I have not seen that happen.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't want to have a situation where someone is reviewing their own decision. So the
Okay.
appeal has to go to a different board that has not had it before it. So we couldn't have someone who would serve both the ARB and the Board of Adjustment. So
Right.
if Yannicki.
So we hadn't talked about this before, so it's good to know that
Right.
he was planning to stand down
Yeah,
from.
if
Board
Yannicki
of
gets the
Adjustment.
appointment to ARB in a full-time position, he would stand down from the alternate that he is serving with the Board of Adjustment.
Okay, so we do
I
have,
get that from the interview.
yeah, I didn't either,
Yeah.
but.
Well, but it shouldn't be about his
Him.
choice. It
No,
should be
it's not
about
about his choice.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't know that was
Yeah,
also.
he
his-
would be required.
Don't go anywhere, Mara.
Because otherwise he would be required to review his own decisions, which
Yeah.
is.
Right, doesn't make sense.
Which
Yeah,
is not, a clean look at an appeal.
right.
I just wanted to clarify, they don't go to ARB if they have a Board of Adjustment issue. Zoning's already confirmed before they go to ARB. So people go to Board of like the timing of what you stated doesn't ever happen. It goes to Board of Adjustment if they have a variance need long before it goes to ARB. So that variance would have to be addressed before we'd put them on an agenda. And HPC doesn't, so there's.
Well, I do have an awareness of a project that went to the Board of Adjustment, which I would think would have gone to the ARB, and so
No, I'm just saying the order that it goes in. It goes to Board of Adjustment for a variance first. I just wanted to make sure it was
Okay.
clear that someone's not,
Let's.
they're not appealing in
Let's
the reverse.
take a step back here, though.
Yeah.
But I assume that you agree with Neil's interpretation that we wouldn't have the same
Right.
person
Right.
passing judgment more than one time.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, as long as we're all on
Yes.
that same page,
Just
I
wanna
think
make
we're
sure.
good.
Did not mean to cause confusion, but
Yeah.
it was just the
Okay.
overlap of one person on two commissions that is concerning.
Okay. Now that we have that settled, right? We do have that settled?
Yeah.
Okay,
settled.
then, Yannicki, is that
Yannicki.
better? I was doing it wrong
No, you're
before.
fine. Everybody.
Are we going to go ahead with that appointment? All right, and just so you all know, we are having just had two resignations from Sustainability Commission, Michael Staus and Carla Armbruster. So we're gonna need to do some recruitment for
Mhm.
sustainability.
Mhm.
So think about those who you might know that would be interested in that position. All right, I believe unless there is something that I have overlooked, that concludes our work session and gives us about 4 minutes of break before we start at 7:30 in our regular meeting. All right. David, where's the oar? I couldn't do it fast enough.
Oh, no, you're good.
All right, welcome to the regular meeting of the Webster Grove City Council for February 6th. We welcome comments, questions, ideas from persons in attendance. You may speak when recognized by the mayor, and you will also be able to speak for 3 minutes. If you would like to speak, there are speaker cards available on the table here. We have 2 opportunities tonight for speaking. One is during our public hearing about the property on Fairview. So if that's what you would like to speak about, we do ask you fill out a speaker card and I will call on you at that time. And if you have other kinds of comments that you would like to make, we'll do that during the comments, the remarks from community and visitors. And those comments will be limited to 3 minutes. If you are on Zoom, you may also make comments for 3 minutes. We would ask that you just use the raise your hand function at the appropriate time, and we'll allow you to speak for the duration of your 3 minutes. All right, we will start as usual with the roll call.
Mayor Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss.
Here.
Councilmember Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Alexander. Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Here.
All right, as we are at the beginning of Black History Month, we'd also have a proclamation, which I will now read. Whereas the observance of Black History Month calls our attention to the past struggles of African Americans and to the cultural, economic, spiritual, and political contributions and achievements of African Americans in Webster Groves and in the nation, and acknowledges there's a continued need to address racism and strengthen the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our lives. Webster Groves is home to the North Webster neighborhood, one of the oldest African American communities in the St. Louis region, with rich historical significance for the educational opportunities it provided, the stability of its housing stock, and the many successful African Americans that called North Webster home. Whereas the city honors the many African Americans who have played an important role in improving the quality of life in our city, including Janet Irene Thomas, who we recognize as an extraordinary citizen in her life accomplishments with her perseverance in seeking higher education and as a community activist. Irene's parents knew that education was important, and they moved the family to Webster Groves, where they raised their family on North Elm Avenue. Irene and her siblings attended Douglas High School, and all 9 of them were able to pursue college educations. And whereas Irene is recognized as the first African-American woman to graduate from Webster College, now Webster University, on June 4th, 1950. She received a BS in music from the college and received prestigious awards such as the Helen Liston Award, and was an accomplished vocalist and pianist, and could perform arias in French, Spanish, and Italian. Whereas Irene faced racism in her education when people refused to be seated in an auditorium with her and her family, or she was expected to use a handkerchief when using a common instrument in the classroom. However, Irene was courageous and was not deterred by the many obstacles she encountered to complete her higher education. And likewise, in her personal life, she would demand access to public places like the Ozark Movie Theater. And whereas the city of Webster Groves is proud to honor the history of African Americans like Irene Thomas and recognize that we must continue to work to treat all persons with fairness, dignity, and respect to create a world that is just and peaceful with opportunity for all. Now, therefore, I, Laura Arnold, Mayor of the City of Webster Groves, on behalf of the entire City Council, hereby proclaim February 2024 as Black History Month in Webster Groves on the 6th day of February 2024. And I'll make sure this gets delivered to Webster University for their appropriate placement on campus. All right, we now move to our public hearing. And we will begin, I'm going to open the public hearing, which is designation of structures and surrounding property as city designated historic structures located at 407 Fairview Avenue, Bethany Lutheran Church. All right, so now we have an open public hearing, and Mara, we are ready for you.
Wonderful. they're getting the PowerPoint up. So just as a reminder, I know you've had, the Historic Preservation Commission's been pretty busy the last year. So you had seen the Lustron homes, mouse? Is it over there? Oh, there it is. Oh, there's a clicker too. You saw the Lustron homes, you saw 15 Marvin Court. So this is the next one, that has come through the Historic Preservation Commission. So the hearing this evening is for Bethany Lutheran Church, located at 407 Fairview, for a local historic nomination. Just as a bit of information, this came to the Historic Preservation Commission by a series of residents or citizens who had asked the commission to take this on as a project. And a reminder that the code section allows by a motion of the HBC acting as a body. So doesn't have an application by a property owner, similar to the Lustrons, but acting as a body of the HPC. I know you've seen a lot of these before. I'm not going to go through and read through all of the different criteria for nomination, but essentially you just need to have one of these criteria. The commission determined, and you'll see underlined the ones that they felt were appropriate for this particular nomination. And there's a series of them. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7, 8 of the criteria that they felt were important in the designation of this structure. Properties. In your packets, you did have a series of documentation on the history of the property. I'm going to very briefly just go over some of the high points that were brought out in the public hearing before the Historic Preservation Commission. They did forward this to the council with a unanimous decision to recommend the local nomination. I did explain in the meeting the fact that this piece of property was part of the Tuxedo Park plat, which was recorded with St. Louis County, June 4th of 1890. The street of Fairview used to be named Providence. So in some of the early articles, we actually found the church referenced as being at 407 Providence. And then later it changed to Fairview. The property is made up of what the legal description describes as lots 44, 45, and 46. Due to the way our zoning code is written, properties that are under common ownership prior to the adoption of our zoning code in 1956 are deemed merged by essentially an operation of law. All these properties were owned by Bethany Evangelical Lutheran Church. January 16th of 1933 is when they finally put the three pieces together. So I'm going to briefly go through a little bit of the history. This particular congregation was founded in 1897 by Danish immigrants who lived in Webster Groves, and in particular lived in this general area, some over on the other side of the railroad tracks and some in this area. In 1904, the church was constructed. This is a photo of the parishioners in November 20th of 1904 in front of the structure. The land was bought by their Ladies' Aid Society, and they also raised the money to hire the architect to design the church. The men of the congregation did some of the construction, actually quite a bit of the construction of the church based on the plans of the architect that they hired. The church bell was with money that the children of the congregation raised for their funds for the bell. In 1904, because of the timing of the church, there was an artist who had come for the 1904 World's Fair, and in exchange for the ability to stay in the Reverend's home, he painted a painting that's on the back behind the altar. His name was Bernard Hellig. And in 1930, the stained glass windows were installed in memory of the various founders of the church. The members of the church did give the Historic Preservation Commission a number of the older documents, which include the Articles of Incorporation of the church, and the church census of members from 1899 through 1926. There were a number of photographs that were in there of the various members. This particular photo is a couple of the members who also gave money towards the founding of the church. There was also a lot of documentation at the 75th anniversary and later at the 100th anniversary of the church. It included very extensive discussion about the various members, who the different people were within the church. A lot of the original documents were in Danish. The services were in Danish through 1926 and then went to all English in 1930. And there was also a list of subscribers, how much each of them paid towards the building of the church. $20, $100, $1. All their names were inscribed in a book that they still have. They also had documentation on the fees for the architect. They also had kept some of the bids for building materials, as well as the cornerstone and some of the other things, in particular the artist also for their different a receipt for the artist drawing, how many dollars that they paid. The last piece, a couple last pieces, the Historical Society has already recognized this as a century structure, having been built in 1904. The church also, it's quite important in the Danish origins, that they tie everything to the idea of their heritage as a seafaring people. So this boat was the boat that was a model that was placed in the church and was built by Bonnie Rasmussen, who was and I'm going to pronounce her name wrong, a descendant of one of the founders of the church. Sorry, this goes a little faster. All of that documentation was discussed at the meeting. We had a series of people who came to speak at the meeting. And then the various documentation is an exhibit for moving forward. Should this be approved, all of the documentation would become a part of the ordinance.
Right, question from our.
Who's responsible for the maintenance of the church?
So right now, the church is up for sale. So it's technically, I believe, the Central States Synod who has taken over the church and who has it under up for sale.
Okay.
Are the owners of the church in support of this?
The owners of the church at this time were not in support of it at the public hearing that was held before the Historic Preservation Commission.
How would this limit the sale of the church?
It doesn't limit the sale of the church. If a person came forward and wanted to demolish the structure, they would go back to the Historic Preservation Commission and request the ability to demolish it. What it does do is it gives a little bit more. I've talked with a number of people who are interested in some of the history about it, in terms of potentially moving forward with, if it moves forward to another level of historic designation, there's the possibility of tax credits that could be used. And it does not limit what can be done within it. I've talked to people about doing a single family home out of it. I've talked to people about doing a bed and breakfast. I've talked to people about some possibilities of some changes where they would go before Planning Commission to get some other special procedures to maybe do a couple units inside of it, but that would be a change of zoning. Right now, you could do a CUP for another church. I know someone came to the hearing and asked, they were talking about a congregation, I believe Buddhist possibly, that were potentially interested in looking at it.
More on those lines, thank you, David. If we had someone who wanted to put a different congregation in there, there's not much parking there. Would it meet would the CUP be possible, given the size of the church and our current rules about parking and other standards?
I would think it would. I mean, I understand the CUP talks about all of that and traffic and congestion. But we've been trying again to reduce some of our parking numbers. And I think our recent update did lower numbers for things like churches, because sometimes it's local and people can carpool and people can have other means of getting to the facilities.
A second question, and then I'll step aside and let you all ask some more before I continue. Is the house that is that is also owned by the church part of the historic designation?
That is, the HPC did have a conversation about that and recommended adding that to the overall as a part of the two structures with the property itself.
So what then is, I mean, essentially, what's the historic value of the house other than it's tied to the church? I mean, is there any inherent historic value to the house?
We were not able to find, the HPC looked through the documentation, was not able to find anything anything more specific other than it acted as the rectory. It was also built by them, but it was built much later. So more along the lines of 1920, but most of the documentation did not have much else on that particular structure.
Okay. Other questions?
So if we go forward with this and the sale of the property occurs, in order to demolish this house, they would be an additional step for the new owner in order to demolish the property.
So you have the same step. If you want to demolish it and it's not historic, you do still go before historic preservation. It's just not a public hearing. If it is historic and you want to demolish it, you go before Historic Preservation Commission and it's a public hearing. The public hearing lets more neighbors know. Right now, if it's not designated, it goes before HPC without any notification to anyone nearby. But it's the same process. It's the same number of meetings. It's just a public hearing versus just a standard item agenda.
How does the criteria change?
There's a slightly longer set of criteria. There's the main set of criteria includes some of the basics. And then when you get into historic preservation, it has a few more criteria about its ability to be used, productive use, and some other things. It's the same application that we provide, and there's no fee, whether you're going for a public hearing or whether you're going for just a agenda item.
Has there been a process or an attempt to try to get this on the National Historic of Registered Landmarks?
This is the first step that has even been taken in any way, shape, or form
But it's not a
regarding that.
prerequisite to do it, right?
No, you can do it in either way. You can either go to national first and then do local, or you can go to local and then national. It doesn't matter which orientation. Usually you need a lot more very specific documentation for going to National Register. This one actually had its historic sheets already documented by a member of the Park Service for St. Louis County, which is actually a pretty big step for being able to do that first initial paperwork working towards national.
It just seems like we get these all the time when there's about to be a sale or a transition of ownership. It seems like, well, why wasn't the history important prior to this, you know?
And again, I know the historic preservation has looked at how can they tackle different things. Right now, the number of homes and structures that are over 100 years old just keeps increasing. And so they've been trying to just sometimes pick their battles, figure out what they can tackle next as they look at things, because that is one of their goals is to nominate structures.
Did the current owners indicate why they were against the designation? They just think it might be more difficult to sell, or?
I'm sorry, I don't know exactly the wording that they used. I'd have to go back and look at the Zoom meeting. They just stated that they were not in favor. I'm trying to remember what else she said. It was a very long meeting with a lot of people talking, so I apologize. I don't have the exact wording of why they were against it.
If it were to be lots for homes, how many is it just the 3 lots then? Or would the
So-
church have to come down to have the 3 lots?
It's not 3 lots, it's 1 lot.
Okay,
So
you
in
mentioned 44, 45, and 46.
that are merged by
Okay.
operation of law from
Okay.
1956. So it's a single lot. Right now, there's a couple key things related to this. There is currently a plat, which actually is going to be coming to you at some point soon. There's an adverse possession lawsuit between the neighbor and this particular property to obtain some of their land. And so there's a plat between the church, the current property owners of the church, and the neighbor that's going to move the lot line over. So before the lot line moved over, when I was trying to figure out for people if both structures were torn down, an engineer would have to, by the inch, somehow figure out whether there was a possibility of being 3 lots. It was probably not going to necessarily work. And now with this reduction of land, I don't think you can get 3 lots out of it.
You could get 2.
You could get 2, one where the church is sitting, one where the house is sitting. The way that you'd have to cut it off, because you have to meet the 60-foot wide width plus the average width plus the 7,500 square feet. The sliver that's coming out the whole side is 6 feet of land that's going to be removed from the church property and to go to the neighbor's property. And that's also going to need some variances by the council, because the garage in the back is on the property line, and the rectory, now that the line is moved, is no longer going to be in compliance to its setback. So I've got that plat in. It's going to the next plan commission meeting. So my initial, without being an engineer and not having an original survey of the property till this week, I had originally thought I ran the numbers where you could maybe get 3 lots, but I wasn't sure if I could run the numbers because it's an odd shaped lot.
You mentioned something about tax credits earlier, and that by us doing this, it sets it up for the potential to get tax credits. Where would the tax credits come from?
So the state of Missouri has programs where, so like the Tuxedo Park Bed and Breakfast, they used tax credits. They were on the National Register, and they were used that for their bed and breakfast. We have another property that is on Gore, right before the railroad tracks. They used historic tax credits recently for their upgrade of their building. So we've had a number of properties around here that have been able to use the tax credits. It needs to be for something that, and I don't know all the ins and outs of the tax credits, but most often for something that produces something. It's not for someone's single family home,
Gotcha.
but it could be for bed and breakfast and other things. There's also some new funding on the federal level for religious institutions, religious buildings. I've watched a couple of their webinars on how that works when talking with some of the other churches in the area about possibly seeing if they could utilize those.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
I just want to make sure I understand the, excuse me, the owners of the property is against this,
That is correct.
but it's not going to slow up the sale of the property when they do sell it.
It does not slow up the sale for something to be historic.
Okay. And then somebody buy it historic, then they want to tear it down. There's nothing stopping them from doing that as well.
No matter what, any structure over 50 years old that's going to be demolished goes to Historic Preservation Commission. If it is in a historic district, or if it's been nominated as historic, it then just has a hearing before that same board. So it's a hearing that allows the neighbors to be aware, to be able to come and speak should they wish to speak.
Okay, so I guess I'm coming to the point, why are we doing this?
Usually I'm the one asking that question. So.
So again, we have a number of historic structures around the community. Residents came to the commission and asked for the potential nomination of this particular structure to try to help look at options for potentially saving it from being demolished. There are a number of people who've come who are very interested, who've talked to me about what can they do in that building who want to save it. I've had probably 60% of the people who come talk to me want to save it. Maybe 40% are potentially interested in demolishing it, but only if they think that they can already have 3 lots. We would talk through the process of splitting the lots and doing a subdivision plat. Many of them had said that it's more trouble to have to go through the subdivision plat and tear down both the buildings and weren't necessarily interested. But we walked through the process and gave them everything that they could do so that they could look at that option. And they're up to 3 lots if you tore down both structures. And potentially, again, I still don't know once that 6 feet is gone.
When you talk about the neighbor, are you talking about a neighbor that's living in the rectory or is the rectory
No, on
vacant?
the other side of the rectory.
Okay.
Rectories, it's rented.
It was a rental property and I think it is still being rented, but I apologize. I didn't look at the current occupancy.
So, but those 60% of prospective potential buyers, they don't need our landmark in order to save this.
They don't. They do not.
Madam Mayor, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you. No, usually, I wanted to follow up on Councilman Smith's question. So if I'm understanding correctly, it doesn't impede a sale if it were designated, but could it possibly impact the price of the sale?
I don't necessarily see how it would impact a price unless someone wanted to raise it because it was historic. I don't know.
Well, I was thinking if it was more difficult to sell it because of the designation. And I'm curious, so are the owners here this evening?
I don't know if they're on Zoom.
I was just gonna follow up more in terms of trying to understand why they were against it, because that seems curious.
Yeah, I don't know if they're on. I don't see them on Zoom.
Thank you. That was all, Madam
I just a couple more questions. I know that, for example, in the restaurant homes, we notified or HPC notified everyone. Some people objected, some people we didn't hear from. Setting aside those groups that we've done, have we in the past had individual structures that we've designated as historic with opposition from the homeowner or the property owner?
You mean, I don't know specifically an individual property, one all on its own with opposition. I do know we had opposition to the strip on Marshall, the little commercial strip. That was,
Zeta Del or whatever. Is that the one? Zeta Del? Is that the one we're talking about?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. There was opposition by a couple of the property owners in that strip.
Is it the property had like a mailing campaign maybe about a year ago trying to save this church? It was 2 years ago.
It was at the point when there was a dispute between the congregation and the synod about whether or not the congregation was viable and would continue to be recognized.
Okay.
They stopped holding services during COVID.
Yeah.
And then that dwindled even further in terms of the congregation.
So now the church, I'm sorry, you might have said this earlier, so there's no congregation now.
There's no congregation now. The synod has already emptied out the church and has put it up for sale. Not all the historical stuff that's within the church, but they did take out all the, like the documentation, the files
religious
and other
stuff,
things.
The relics and things, whatever religious things. I guess it doesn't matter, but I mean, because it's just a
A
curiosity.
number of things were taken out of the church,
Saving the structure.
saving the structure.
And the mural is still there.
The mural is currently still there and the stained glass is still there.
I assume the sculpture of the boat is not.
That I don't know.
Okay.
That I do not
It's
know.
beautiful, by the way, absolutely gorgeous. I just want to make one general comment as we talk about this and, you know, you mentioned Tuxedo Park Bread and Breakfast. We've had discussions about Peace Church. You've talked about tax credits. We have, you know, more than 25 church buildings within Webster Groves. Many of them house congregations that are, you know, 100, 150 years old. I have a feeling that we're going to have some more of these. I hope every single one of those congregations remains viable, but I know that generally they're struggling. And so, you know, I do think we need to think about whether, is it every time we have a church structure is it going to be historic based on, you know, age alone? And that's not really a statement about this case. It's just, that's the community that we are, and we're gonna have lots of decisions, I think, in the next decade along these same kinds of lines, which are important for us to think about kind of the big picture as well.
For me, it's just ultimately, this building's gonna be torn down.
I mean, we don't know that. We don't know that. I mean, Mara said she talked to people who are interested in saving it. I mean, you asked like, why do we do this?
Mhm.
We don't have a whole lot of tools in our toolbox, right, to save things. This is not necessarily going to keep that building there forever and ever. But it's a way for us as a community to say what's important to us. It's a way for us to recognize the neighbors and descendants of people who built that church and say, we see you, we know that's a landmark, and we're recognizing it.
Yeah.
It's not always about what can be sold that should be the most important thing in my
Which
opinion.
like the Lustrum homes. We ended up saying, if they didn't want to make their home historical, don't force them. They own it, don't force it. And it sounds like that's what we're doing here. The owners don't want to make it historical while we're doing it.
But you're talking about an owner that doesn't occupy technically doesn't occupy the church. It was the, congregants that occupied the church and utilized it and grew to love it. And that's why they are,
But they don't own
find
it.
this significant. No, they don't, but they kept it viable for 120 years.
But it's
So-
also owned by the governing body of the church. And if they really thought it was important, wouldn't they advocate for the importance of this structure? As a governing body that knows their church, knows their community, knows what the importance of their historical religious.
Well, one of the things that, and I can't remember what her title was, but that she spoke about the
She's bishop.
bishop spoke about at the hearing at HPC was they're not in the business of maintaining buildings. They don't have a viable congregation in there right now, and they don't want to use their church funds for their mission and their values to maintain a building. So that's why they put it up for sale. Because in their eyes, like, it's an empty building. But in the eyes of, I think once we get to the public comments, you'll hear like, there's a little bit of contention and dispute over who really should own that building. It was taken over by the Synod when the numbers dropped, but that's not who built the building and maintained it for 100+ years.
Well, there's an importance to the community, which is a factor here that's not necessarily a factor to the owning.
The
property.
Senate.
Yeah, the Senate. And so it's like, if the community finds value in that building and in its history, this is their opportunity. This is our opportunity to say so. Like, I mean, I think I do feel like it's a little different than the Lestron Homes example, where we had individual homeowners who were basically making the case that anything historical about this property has already been removed or covered up or whatever. That's a whole different thing than a building that's not a single person home, and it's not it's a community landmark to some extent. So like, I don't know. I see this as very different.
Has there been any consideration from the group that is trying to preserve it, to purchase it?
I think you should listen to the public comments
Okay.
because I think that will help.
Okay.
Is the building structurally sound?
I know that of the people that have gone through, some of them are architects. They have stated that there are some things that would need to be addressed. It has been maintained for a number of years, but obviously with the dwindling congregation, there hasn't been some of the maintenance that probably should have happened in the last years. But most of them have stated that, they didn't think they were going to have to tear huge parts down or do anything. They talked about doing some small additions, potentially connecting the rectory building to the main building, some different options on some small additions.
Excuse me.
Again, I've had quite a few people spend a lot of time asking about what they could do and what they would need to do before Architecture Review Board to understand if it was historic or if it wasn't historic. Both cases you go before Architecture Review Board. And it's the same sort of thing with HBC. It's a hearing before Architecture Review Board at the beginning of the meeting versus just going to Architecture Review Board in the middle of the meeting.
Other questions for Mara?
You can tell the hard work that was put into it, so I appreciate that.
It was the HPC members. They did spend a lot of time going through and finding the documentation.
It was really interesting to read last night. Is like I didn't know much about Danish religion or Danish history, and learned a lot just reading some of these documents.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Mara. We'll go to our public comments, and if you have joined us a little late, if you would like to make a comment about this particular issue, we're going to have that right now. If you wish to comment on something unrelated to this public hearing, we'll have another opportunity. Also, if you came in and you didn't fill out a comment card yet and you would like to make a comment, please do so. They're right here by the door. And we will begin with Carol Dunkey. And if you'll come up and state your name and your address, and then you'll have 3 minutes for your comment.
I'm Carol Denke. I'm a member of the HPC and I'm an historic architect. And I implore you to save this building. I wish that you could have heard the impassioned community members who came to the HPC. These are church members. They're the descendants of the founders. They are neighbors in Tuxedo Park who love this building and consider it to be a part of the fabric of the community. Those stained glass windows have the names of the founders of the church in the windows. It means a lot to this community, a whole lot. I wish that you could have heard them. It is our function as a commission to serve our community, and I feel very strongly that it's the community to be served. I do recall the objections that the current owner had, and I believe that they are based on misinformation. The objection stated was that we have no wish to maintain this building as an historic structure. I think it's very important to be clear there are no additional maintenance requirements that would be placed upon the owner. None. They don't have to restore it. They don't have to preserve it. They are free to sell it and to collect their money. They're interested in disposing of the property and being done with it. This designation will not impede that. Once the building is sold, or even now, the use could be changed. A change would have to comply with planning and zoning and building codes. But we have a multitude of historic buildings around this town whose use has been changed, sometimes more than once. And once this is torn down, it's gone. We have lots and lots of new houses around here. When are we ever going to have a chance to have another Bethany church that means so much to the members of this community? I implore you to save this building, to serve the members of our community who we are here to serve. And if you all have any questions about anything that took place in the hearing, I was there. I would be happy to answer them, or if you have any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I mean, if I could, other than its age, and obviously the personal history that a lot of our community members have with the church, is there anything architecturally historic about the building? I've read the documents that indicates, the facade and everything, but anything other that makes this building unique compared to another building built around that era?
Yes, and actually, if Mara could, there's the criteria under which a nomination could be made. Okay, we only need one of those criteria. And I believe this building had like 8 or 9, that it serves as a visual reminder of the history of our community, of how we came to be, of who we are. It's architecturally significant in its architectural style. It's significant in the beautiful mural that is contained within the building. And, if need be, Mara could revisit those criteria with you because they are significant. And that is the basis upon which the building can be nominated, and that is a part of the ordinance for historic preservation that was drafted by and enacted by the city of Webster Groves. So we are following the law and representing our community.
Thank you very much. All right, next we have Jim Bennett.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Jim Bennett. I live at 106 Arthur Avenue. My family and I have been residents of Webster Groves for over 30 years. And it was in 1992 that we moved from Central Illinois to 405 Fairview Avenue at the invitation of Bethany Lutheran Church, as I was coming to St. Louis and Webster Groves to do my doctoral studies at Eden Seminary. We lived in the church parsonage for 4 years, and my family and I worshiped regularly at Bethany Church until we were able to purchase a home elsewhere in Webster Groves. I hadn't been in that building for 25 years, but this past summer, I was part of a group that helped clean out Bethany Church. And I was taken back to many of the memories I had of that congregation and the people that welcomed us and rented that parsonage at a ridiculously low rent to a struggling family. And that has been part of the mission of that church in the many years. Conversation I had with the bishop this past summer, expressing my concern that there be some functional use of that building in the future. And the result of that conversation was the fact that the bishops and the synod wants to sell that property because it's been a financial drain on the synod. The synod offices are in Kansas City. And it was mentioned earlier that some comment about property ownership. In the Lutheran polity, it is the synod that owns the building, not the congregation. So it is theirs to do with what they will. My hope in support of this resolution is that there might be some functional use for this building yet, because not just because of its architectural significance, but also the cultural significance. In the time that I was there on this past summer cleaning it out, I helped load 2 van loads of historical documents from the Danish Society that had housed all of their historical documents at Bethany. And I certainly could see that building become a functional Danish Historical Society, another congregational building, some other historical or cultural or community setting. So I urge the council to support this resolution.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Tracy Downing.
Hi. Thanks.
Tracy, would you speak into the microphone there?
Yes.
Thank you.
Better. Thank you for holding this hearing, for inviting us here. My maiden name is Toft. My great grandparents were part of the founding group that helped build the church. My father was, and the aunts and uncles were confirmed there. It goes on. You can fill in those blanks. I did not attend church there, so I've heard some really reasonable questions that I endorse about why didn't people like me, descendants of the founders, get involved? Why is this happening now when the synod wants to sell the church? I was called by people who know me, who know my history, at the time that the synod decided to close the church. There are many things disputed by the congregants with respect to how that was done. And I don't have independent knowledge of this, but I know the synod was not spending money to keep up the church, and in fact, took the money on hand when they closed the church, which according to the church secretary was about $100,000. So they're not suffering. That money was left many times in wills to go to that church in particular. And so they have that. So that's not a dire situation. I became involved when there was a dumpster out back and it was piled high. And I called the bishop in Kansas City and I said, I'm just learning about this. I think there's pictures of my dad and my grandma and people in their artifacts. Could I please dumpster dive? And she said, yes. It was a long conversation. We talked about many other things. I said, just give me a few days. I'll be neat. I'll be tidy. But I think that and I honestly had pulled out photo albums and ledgers and things that were just kind of thrown in there. She promised me that the dumpster would stay, and 2 hours later it was taken away. I'm worried that many things have been thrown away. The documents that belong to the Danes, I don't know where those are. I don't know if they still exist. I'll be honest. I doubt that they do. My question is this: why the rush to sell? The MLS listing went on with a subtext that said the highest and best use for these buildings is to raise them and subdivide the lot and build. As far as I can tell, no money has really been invested by the ELCA, yet they stand to really make a windfall from this. I don't know why there wouldn't be a reason just to slow it until we could get some more people involved. The other thing too, I would just finish with this. The only irreversible thing to do here is to raise that building. And I would ask that we not. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next speaker is Dave Buck.
Dave Buck, 124 South Elm. Just several things. First of all, to me, I think it's sacrilegious to tear down a church, particularly an historic one. The one in Rock Hill, the historic stone church that they tore down to put a UGAS in, I think that's disgusting. And so I think to tear this church down would be a huge mistake. The other thing, this is shades of things to come. Religion in America is down. Church attendance across the board of our church, 30 churches in Webster Groves are down across the board. There's going to be more small churches going out of business. And so you better get ready because this is the first of probably a trend. Out of curiosity, today, I had a great conversation with Robert Beggs. Robert, is that you? No, yeah, Robert, Dave Buck. We talked on the phone today. Yeah, he's selling the property. We had a good conversation. He's charging a fair and reasonable price to me. It was much lower than what I thought. Then I talked to my friend, Maureen Elliott, who is a co-owner of the Tuxedo Park St. Louis Bed and Breakfast. These two properties are so highly analogous. They both started as churches. They're both on a street corner. They're both in residential districts. They're both, well, Jenny Kirkland lives right across the street from Tuxedo Park, and it's bed and breakfast. And like, it fits in with the neighborhood. I think people love it. And the point is, Maureen is like a visionary. And we had this great conversation about what she would do with this property, because she thinks there's a demand and a great need for additional bed and breakfast in Webster Groves because we don't have a boutique hotel. And so her vision was, as these small churches close down, turn them into church bed and breakfast. And she would start with the Bethany, call it Bethany B&B. And she would probably put 4 to 8 units in there. She had a vision for the property. I mean, it's an idea and it's hope and it's not destruction. And we can keep that church building alive. It's adorable. It's charming. The thought of tearing it down would be a huge mistake. So that's where I am.
Thank you very much.
I just want to point out, we're not voting on.
We are not.
Constructing this facility, like, we're just putting a landmark on it. And so if it wants to be constructed, that'll be at a different time.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah. And.
I just want to make sure that we're clear and the public's clear that we are not saying that this building is gonna be demolished. We don't know what's gonna happen.
Right, or we're not saving it from being demolished.
Demolished, yeah.
And let's finish the public comments. Is there anyone joining us on Zoom who'd like to make a public comment? If so, would you please use the raise your hand function? All right, then I would ask the city attorney to enter the appropriate items into the record.
At the close of the public hearing, I would move for the admission of the following exhibits. Number one, the ownership legal information is listed in the St. Louis County Department of Revenue records. Number two, a copy of the notice of public hearing that was posted on the property on December the 21st of 2023. Number three, letters to the owner of the property notifying of the intent to nominate and of the public hearing before the Historic Preservation Commission dated December 27th, 2023. Number four, the affidavit of publication for ad in the Webster Kirkwood Times. Number five, the documentation on the history of the property, which includes 22 items. Number six, emails in support of the nomination, which includes 4 emails. Number seven, Mara Perry's PowerPoint before the City Council, February the 6th of 2024. That's tonight's PowerPoint. Number eight, copies of the Historic Preservation Ordinance of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri. And finally, number nine, copies of the Secretary of the Interior Standards for the Treatment of Historic Properties, Standard for Preservation. I would move for the admission of the following these exhibits.
Thank you. At this point, I just want to make sure, is there any reason that any member of the council would like to leave the public hearing open? All right, then we will close this public hearing. And I would ask Councilmember Hickson Shepherd if you'd call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9245.
Second.
Bill 9245, first reading, an ordinance designating and establishing the structures and surrounding property located at 407 Fairview Avenue as city designated historic landmarks and matters related thereto.
Do we have any additional discussion?
I was encouraged the council to watch that, the public hearing from historic preservation. But it was there were a lot of comments from neighbors, from architects, from the bishop, from a potential buyer. So like lots in there to check out if you, sorry, Katie. If you are interested in learning more about what that discussion was like.
Right, and I appreciate that. And I honestly, thank you. I appreciate that. I just, I'm going to vote for the designation of this piece of property. But from the comments I've heard, you know, that to save this building, that's not what we're doing here. We're not saving this building. We're just giving it a historical designation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Other comments? May we have the second reading, please?
Bill 9245, second reading, an ordinance designating and establishing the structures and surrounding property located at 407 Fairview Avenue as city designated historic landmarks and matters related thereto.
All right, thank you. That ends our public hearing for today. For those of you who are following this, at our next meeting in 2 weeks, we will have the third reading and a vote on this particular ordinance. So if you have additional comments, feel free to send them to us. Excuse me. All right, we now move on to our remarks from the community and visitors, and we are going to start with Carmen Freeman. Thanks to you all for coming this evening. Hi there, Ms. Freeman. If you give us your name and address, and then please, you'll have your 3 minutes for comments.
Thank you. My name is Carmen Freeman and I live in 319 Oak Tree Drive. Dear Mayor Arnold, City Manager Dr. People, City Council members, thanks for this opportunity to address our situation. Our home is located on Oak Tree Drive. This is one street south of the recreation complex. A creek flows parallel to Oak Tree Drive to the north and Glendale Drive to the south. The creek is exposed between Selma and Edgar Road. This creek runs between the fence of the backyards that leaves a gap of 30 to 60 feet. The creek hugs our property in the south and the east. Since about December, we are regularly seeing 3 to 4 deer in this creek area that feed and come to our garden and feed in it, and also in the neighbor's garden. We assume that the deer were dislocated when construction for a new road off of Edgar Road toward Laclede Station Road started. A strip of forest was taken down to build this road. The deer now in our area are so used to people that they can't be chased away. One must approach as close as 9 feet for them to slowly walk away. I have sprayed liquid fence onto my flower beds and the boundaries of the creek. The deer have come back that evening, lying and standing in the area, and that I freshly sprayed, and to my surprise, started eating the treated plants. Deer in my garden frightens me and makes me very concerned about my health. Deer do not belong in a city garden nor in cities, just as we are not accepting buffaloes or cows. Large game is more than a nuisance, it's a threat. Gardens can and should support small-scale wildlife. I'm a member of 2 native plant groups. Thus, in our garden, more than 80% of all plants are native. The role of city gardens can be to reverse the decline of insects, birds, and smaller creatures. Large game is unsuitable. Deer are native, but native to forested areas. In cities, they become pests like rats. Since the deer showed up, I'm worried about my health and my garden. Having tried several techniques to keep deer away from our garden, but none helped, I now turn to you. As a citizen of Webster Groves, I hope that in collaboration with the City Council, we can approach the Missouri Department of Conservation to come up with a plan to remove the 3 deers from our area. In addition, I would like to ask the City Council to provide answers to the following questions. Who is the point person in Webster Groves regarding deer complaints? What is the deer management plan of Webster Groves? How can the citizen work together with Webster Groves to reduce the numbers of deer in our area? Thanks for your attention and help.
Thank you. And just so you know, we generally don't follow up immediately to public comments during the course of this meeting, but I will be in touch with you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
Our second public comment card is from Dave Buck.
Hey, Buck, 124 South Elm. This is not about the indoor pool. In honor of Black History Month, I've been thinking a lot about the present and future focus of DEI in our community, which in your strategic plan is a value, guiding principle, and strategic goal area. Webster's total population has basically stayed unchanged at 23,000 since 1950. However, the diversity or racial mix within our population is changing, leading to the question, what should Webster's most important DEI priority be? For years, that priority was focused against the Black community, white racism, prejudice, discrimination. But there are 2 other perspectives I'd like to share. First, 85% of Webster's population is white, with a full 15% or 3,500 people being non-white, made up of multiracial, Hispanics, Blacks, Asians. Hispanics are now trending larger than Blacks in our community for the first time in our city's history. The need to dismantle racism extends well beyond Blacks, as these other races have faced their own discrimination, oppression, and violence throughout American history. Should Webster broaden its DEI focus beyond Blacks to include all non-whites? Second, according to rankings by Forbes magazine, Webster ranks number 36 on the list of the 50 richest cities in Missouri out of 935 total cities in the state. Webster's identity has been an affluent white community from the very beginning, earning it the label Queen of the Suburbs. However, despite its affluence, poverty has existed for a long time in our city. As the percent of people in Webster today currently living below the poverty line is 4.8% of our population, or 1,100 people. That rate is higher for kids under 18 at 6%. Webster is hardly alone, and it's not the highest. The national poverty rate is 11.5. It's 13.5 in Missouri. Other St. Louis cities have a higher poverty rates in Webster, such as Clayton, Kirkwood, and Brentwood, with cities such as Des Peres, Rock Hill, Glendale, and Shrewsbury all tracking under Webster. The 2024 poverty guidelines for a family of four is $26,300, while current Missouri minimum hourly wage of $12.30 equates to $25,600, still under the poverty line. Poverty is a long-term problem, as you know, with no easy solutions, but should Webster refocus its DEI efforts to more aggressively move people out of poverty? Because I don't think we work on that at all. Thus, I ask, what should Webster Grove's most important DEI priority be? I truly wonder and worry how our majority affluent white community would answer that question, or deep down, would they even care?
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Is there any new business? Oh, I forgot. Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to make a public comment? All right. Now I again ask, is there any new business? All right, then we will move to our unfinished business. Councilwoman Alexander, could you call for the third reading of bill number 9243, please?
Second.
Bill 9243, third and final reading. An ordinance levying the cost of abating certain nuisances, removal of grass, weeds, limbs, etc., as special tax bills against the properties hereinafter described and constituting levies as liens on the respective properties.
Is there any discussion? All right, let's have the vote, please.
Councilmember Bliss?
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd?
Yes.
Mayor Arnold?
Yes. Is there anything anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda? All right. Councilmember Franklin, could you call for its approval, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for the approval and adoption of the consent agenda.
Second.
Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd?
Yes.
Mayor Arnold?
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss?
Yes. All right, we have appointed to the Arts Commission, Richard Irwin and Charles Yannicki. I was gonna get it too. Yannicki has been appointed to the Architectural Review Board. And we're gonna look for Sustainability Commission members. And we have one opening on the HPC, is that right? Yeah, okay. All right, is there anything else? Then let's call this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Oh.